Hi, my name is Brandon Brana, and I am the transition expert. Today's fabulous guest is Joanna Johnson. Joanna, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Brandon.
Yes, listen, so you had a pretty exciting week, huh?
Very exciting.
Well, for those of you who are just tuning in to this episode of the Transition Expert, as a transition expert, my job is to work with families that are going through transition. So very often I get the call when something happens, something's going to happen, or something needs to happen. And in this case, I received a phone call from one of your family members. Who was that family member from North Carolina that contacted me initially?
Oh, that is my sister, Andrea Clark.
Okay. And she was very, very much concerned about you, Joanna. Is that correct?
So much so, I am going to live with her in the next month. For the next month.
I received a phone call from her about two and a half weeks ago, and in that phone call, she expressed some enormous concerns for her sister, that she was living in a situation that was compromised. And she wanted to get that living situation under control, but she also wanted to make the necessary plans and inroads to get her to North Carolina to live with her. And at that point, communication to your cousin was made, and from your cousin, I then had an opportunity to finally meet you at the residence. Do you want to tell me what happened over the past, say, 60 days that triggered all this?
I think I told Andrea that I couldn't walk.
Mm-hmm.
And she was very concerned about that, but I didn't do anything about that I couldn't walk. In other words, I didn't go to the hospital to check on that. And I didn't have a telephone. We used a system where you don't need a telephone to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what else we did. I fell down one day on some of the, I'll call it garbage. It wasn't garbage. It was just plastic bags full of things that I either needed to throw away or open up and use. And I fell down. I couldn't get myself back up. There was no support for me to stand up on my own. So I laid on the floor for the next 3-4 hours trying to get up. And then when I realized I couldn't get up, I saw a cane or some kind of rod in the corner that I reached. I banged on the walls. I knew that my neighbors on the 3rd floor would hear me, and they did when I finally gave it a huge whack, several whacks. They came down and said, "Joanne, you okay? You need help?" I said, "Yes." I told them my situation. I said, I need someone to come in here and pick me up off the floor, help me up off the floor. And they did. They called, I think they called the police first. I'm not sure. But then the next thing I knew, the Cambridge fire unit was at my door. They talked to me, and they thought the best thing for them to do was come into my house from the back door. I was told they knocked down the back door. I haven't seen it yet. And they came in through my home, and they reached me and picked me up off the floor. And at that point, they immediately took me to the hospital. My foot was without any muscle support. So that's the reason why I could not walk. In other words, I had been lying in bed for probably a month, getting up occasionally to feed myself with eggs is the easiest thing to make. I had those, and I also ate ramen noodles, which came in a cup, and I could barely had the strength to pour hot water from my faucet into the cup, but that's what fed me.
So I'm hearing a couple of things, Joanne, in your story that's way too familiar. One, I'm hearing a person who's, obviously had some indications that the living situation has been compromised. You've been in this living situation for how many years? How many years have you lived in this apartment?
I've lived in the apartment approximately 30, 40 years. I can't remember, and I just haven't asked the landlord.
Okay.
30 to 40 years.
You've been there for a number of years. Tell me a little bit about who you are. What did you do for work?
After college, I think one of the first jobs I applied to was a medical technology job of working exclusively with blood products. And I did that for, I'm going to say 40 years until I retired.
Okay. You've been consistently employed. Did you ever get married? Have any kids or?
Yes, I married the first or second year, I can't remember, that I started working. And I had one male child.
So you say you had one male child. Did he pass away, unfortunately, or?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He went to, he traveled a lot. He was college educated, but he traveled a lot. He had a disease called schizophrenia. In his younger days, there were a few problems, but very few problems. He got to college without any incident. But he traveled a lot, and the last thing I knew is that he went to Florida, and I got a telephone call from the police department telling me that my son had died, and that he was buried. Because the first thing I asked was, where is he buried? How can I get him to bring him back to Massachusetts to bury him here? And I was told that they don't move once a body is buried. They don't allow you to move him, to take him. So
your son passed away. Did they give you the cause of death? Were you at least informed by an autopsy that what the cause of death was?
That's a good question, Brandon. They might have told me, but I immediately spaced out. I was hysterical at that time when she called me.
Understandable.
I have never called that department and asked them for a formal report. And the other problem is, I didn't read my mail that often. That's at this point in my life, I wasn't reading my mail. So they might have sent me mail. Mm-hmm. They might have sent his death certificate, but I will never know if they did or not.
And he was your only child, or did you have
my
any
only
other
child? Yes.
So, well, first off, I'm very sorry for your loss. And the way you received that information, I'm a father myself. I couldn't imagine getting that the way you got it. So mm-hmm. I apologize on behalf of the way that happened for you.
Thank you very much.
Joanne, how old was he? 30s or?
He was, at that time, he was in his 40s.
In his 40s, okay. Mm-hmm. How was life like for you after his passing? Were you still working afterwards or during?
Yes, I was still working.
But how did it affect you? Can you recall back then how you were or how things changed the moment you got that news?
Yes, depressed. I was very depressed. I kind of hid away from life for a while. I did take vacation time when that happened to me, and I was just depressed. And I did continue. I continued life that I knew after a while, but for the most part, I've been depressed from that time until today.
You've been in this property for possibly 40 years, give or take 5 or 10 years. If we do the timeline from then versus now, I would say that was a very big turning point in your life, in terms of the place that you're currently living in. Most often when I work with clients and I come into these situations where the living environment has altered or changed dramatically, a lot of times we can time it back to a particular time or event in their life when something occurred. And the part about therapy in a lot of ways or mental health awareness, if you will, is being able to backtrack those moments, because and a lot of times they're so traumatic. We as human beings try to cope through it, and we block out a lot of things. And in the process of blocking a lot of the pain out, we also block out a lot of the healthy things that give us insight to how we're really feeling and how we're really coping. Did you see a therapist? Were you dealing with a therapist? And what was your support base in terms of that time when you were grieving?
I did not have any support base at all. I did have depression when I was a teenager, and my mother believes in therapy. So I was forced to go to a therapist at that time. And I don't remember how long I was in therapy. Probably not too long, because I grew up poor, and there wasn't that kind of money to go to a therapist for any length of time. So I did not go to see the therapist for too much longer than 2, 3, 4 months, from what I can recall. And I haven't had any support or therapy, because I thought I could do it myself. I thought I could self-heal. I read a lot of magazines about my problem, but now that I think about it, it really didn't help me. I should have gone to see a therapist, but I did not. And I may even go to a therapist today, now that I think about it.
Well, a lot of what you're explaining and a lot of what you're going through is part generational. I mean, generational in the sense that you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you muscle through it, you get through it, and
you keep it private. You keep it private.
You keep it private. You keep it in the immediate family. You keep it behind four walls. But in a case like yours, when it becomes an extreme situation where all of that built up trauma and built up pain begins to manifest itself in the physical neglect, be that, as I'm referring to, the living environment. Like, we classify homes in pertaining to hoarding, or not just hoarding, or just the neglect level of a home on a scale of 1 to 3. We would classify your home as a level 3, meaning that these are usually condemnable living situations. Now, what transpired in your case is what happens very often in my line of work is there's a call, there's a slip, there's a fall. You fail. And you fail in an environment that, let me just let you know, a lot of people don't survive from. You were on the floor. You were on the floor for 3 to 4 hours. You know, there are a lot of other people that have been that end up in those situations for days, if not longer. And unfortunately, they pass away from the injury or from being in that situation. you were fortunate that you had concerned neighbors that were mindful and that you were able to get help. And then as a result of that, the first responders came to the home. Now, when the first responders arrived in your home, they're what we refer to as mandatory reporters. They then report to an elder services, because of your age, an elder protective services group, to let them know what the living conditions are, but also let them know about your well-being. And at that point, you were in a hospital. Then you went to a rehab, and in that rehab, you're now going to be greeted with a social worker who's going to want to talk to you about what are your plans. At that point, you may have vocalized to them that, I'm deciding to move to North Carolina. I'm going to move with my cousin. So they might not have enforced what they would have enforced had you said, look, I'm out of here in 2 hours and I'm going back home. They would have then condemned the property, making it so that you couldn't have an occupancy code at that point. You're very fortunate. And I can't express that to you any further. And the reason that is because there's a bigger, greater plan for you. I think that you didn't quite get over the loss of your son. You didn't have the necessary resources. The old way of addressing trauma, addressing the heartache, and addressing the grieving process didn't serve you because you didn't get the necessary people, the therapy, the grief counseling, the emotional, mental, as well as physical support to get you back where you needed to go. And as a result of the current day, you began to see and feel the experience of all those things begin to gradually degrade, such as your quality of life. Your eating. You mentioned earlier that you were limited to certain food. You were limited to certain rooms. You had to be almost, and I've been in your home, you almost had to be acrobatic in a way to navigate from room to room. And at your age, it's not a matter of when, not a matter of if it's going to happen, meaning that you're going to trip or get injured, but when it's going to happen. And that day, unfortunately, happened. And like I always tell people, opportunity doesn't always come in a nicely gift-wrapped box. Sometimes it comes in a form of an adversity, of a challenge. In your case, that challenge was when you fail, you then now had an opportunity like no other, Joanna, to finally face what you've been possibly avoiding for the past 20 years. Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Oh, I very much agree with what you're saying.
So you're now in this home. We've already agreed that we got to get this place back together so that we can hand the property back over to the landlord. You're moving to North Carolina. What's life going to be like for you in North Carolina? What are we going to do differently in North Carolina?
One of the first things I'm going to do is learn to exercise every day.
Wonderful.
Every single day, because I worry about my foot being, I think the term atrophied, my muscles. I don't want them to not grow, which is what happened, and is the reason why I could not walk. That's my biggest worry, that would happen again. So I'm going to work very hard in making sure that doesn't happen again.
Okay. These are all wonderful things. If there's anything that I want the viewers to take from this call, is the importance of self-care, being aware of how you feel, why you feel what you feel. Emotional maturity is the symptom to avoiding mental health issues. We can't block these things out anymore. We can't run away from them. There's no closet to hide in. You can't bury yourself or insulate yourself from what you really, really feel. It's so important to check in, to talk to people, to have an understanding and a relationship with your support group. People can come to you and say, Joanna, I'm noticing something a little odd about you. Are you okay? And a lot of that is to get rid of that rough exterior that we all put on, that mask, to be tough, to get through life, to be professional, to be excellent, or whatever we pursue in our professional career, but to be in a way approachable where the loved ones that we have in our group, be that your spouse, your best friend, your neighbor, can check in with you when they notice some subtle changes. Being alone and living alone doesn't always warrant you that same ability to have someone to be able to tell you that, maybe there's some things that need to be addressed. But I encourage people that are listening to this to not ever be ashamed or afraid to get help. In your case, you had a support group from someone hundreds and hundreds of miles away in North Carolina that said, no, I'm going to contact someone that's going to help you. And that may have been the difference. You had a concerned neighbor that noticed that you were in trouble and came to your aid. You had the help, the fire department, the police department, you had elder services. All of these people did their job by notifying and making sure that you didn't go back into this living environment and the doors weren't just closed.
And my family would not allow me to go back to that home.
Absolutely. And one thing we didn't talk about is when we first went to the property, one of your biggest concerns was your kitty, right?
Yes.
We were afraid because you were gone in due to the hospitalization and the rehab, that you weren't able to be there for your kitty. So a big concern was whether or not the kitty was going to be okay. We were fortunately able to rescue the kitty from the home. We were able to get the kitty medical attention, make sure that the kitty's in good shape, and get the kitty adopted. So it's not just a win for you, Joanna, but it's also a win for this kitty who also had a hard time in this living environment as well. Would you agree?
Very much so. I'll always feel guilty about that because I did love that cat.
Well,
and every time he saw me, he did make me feel like he's okay. He responded in a way that makes me feel that he's happy, that he sees me, and he's okay. So, but I'm very, very guilty.
Well, I mean,
upset about that. I didn't even allow a friend to come into the house to take him.
Well, in a situation like yours, the welfare of pets are a top priority, making sure that the little kids and pets that can't really make decisions on their own are cared for. But in your case, you weren't really taking care of yourself, to be perfectly honest. And the fact that you weren't taking care of yourself in the best way, it's only understandable, I guess, that the situation would snowball to a circumstance where the cat and any other person or animal in this living environment would be affected. We can't change the past. We can only change the direction of the future. Now, today's show is so important for so many different reasons. If you're listening in and someone's watching this right now, and first of all, it took a lot of courage for you to be here. What message would you tell them? What advice would you give to that person going through similar situations as you?
Well, at some point, I still felt like I wanted to return to my home once it was cleaned. But I listened to many. I decided that I cannot take care of myself. I am 82 years old. I can't take care of myself anymore like I want to. I'm very forgetful about many things. And what my sister from North Carolina did was she called my cousins, the relatives that I have living in the Brockton area that grew up in Brockton. She called my cousins and they took over immediately. And they helped me in every way. Going to the doctors and many other things. Just I did lose a lot of weight in that whole process. So I had no clothes to wear. They bought clothes for me. They bought supplies for me of all kinds. I needed shoes. They bought shoes for me. They I'm now in their care in the Brockton area, and that to me was very helpful. That was the support that I needed. That was the main support that I needed. I feel like I have now, communicating with my cousins and letting them know what kind of world I lived in. And I think the main thing I would do is make an evaluation of what my situation was. And I decided I cannot go back into that home. I will move to North Carolina, where I'll be cared for by my sister. Okay. Even though I'm going to miss my cousins in the Brockton area very much, because they were very helpful.
First off, thank you for everything you did and everything you're sharing. Getting on this show takes a lot of courage. It also takes a lot of courage to pick up a phone and to ask someone for help. I want to thank you, because having you on this show is going to give so much inspiration, insight, and awareness to individuals that are watching in, that are going through their own situation. My thoughts to the viewers that are watching the show: if you're in a situation like Joanne, you've experienced a tremendous loss, and a loss like Joanne's is a very hard thing to deal with without proper professional care. In a support group like the one Joanne had, that was doing the best that they could, then it's always going to be challenging. But be that as it may, get help. Don't close the door. Don't close the blinds. Don't shut yourself off. Don't give up. Continue to fight that good fight. Check in with yourself. Be honest with yourself. Be around people that love you, that care about you, that want to see you thrive and want to see you through these difficult times. Because when you do the exact opposite, then it creates what we've just seen, a scenario where the suffering goes on far too long. At this point, you got a new chance, a new opportunity, a new lease on life. This is an opportunity for you to be in a new environment with new people. I want you to take care of yourself physically, exercise, eat properly, watch your diet, make sure that you see your therapist. I think it's time now more than ever for you to meet with a therapist, meet with someone, tell them how you feel, what you went through, how that experience affected you. Tell them about what happened in your home, in your apartment. Tell them about everything you went through, and be open, honest to whatever feedback they're going to give you, because then and only then will you have the ability to move past it. If you're watching this episode and you're in a situation like Joanne, and you're ashamed, you're embarrassed, you're wondering and worrying about your neighbors and the people that are going to judge you, then don't worry, because we don't care. This is a non-judgmental platform that's designed to inspire and promote healing. Healing, number one. It's all about the health, the physical well-being, and about people that are going to go to the next level and further and continue to live their life the way that they should live their life, which is happy. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate you being on the show. The crew is in your place as we speak. They're working their butt off to locate and find and to get that place turned around for you. We'll be tuning in the next couple of days and checking in with you. I'm so hopeful and optimistic on your future. I think that you're one of the great stories, the happy endings, if you will, of a person who's experienced it. You learn from it and you're going to grow from it. And I'm sending you nothing but the most positive vibes on your new journey to North Carolina. Thank you again for being a guest on this show, The Transition Expert.
Thank you, Brandon.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much.